people didn't do back then. You didn't have money to do like they do now. But we wanted to be gone a day or two. Anyway, he had money saved up for getting married on, and I went to the mailbox and then got the paper, and the bank had gone. I thought, uh-oh, our money's gone, so we couldn't get married. We put it off to Christmas. Well, when Christmas come, we wasn't any better off. We didn't have any money. So I said, well, let's put it off to June again. And Buster said, no, we done put it off once, and we ain't gonna put it on no more. So Mammy Slaughter sold her turkeys and loaned Buster the money. We borrowed the money to get married on. But so we thought, well, we had to cut out. We couldn't afford to stay all night, so Carl Nunn, you know Carl, Coleman's Carl, and Tracy Jones went with us. And we went to up Pikeview and got married. Brother Druin was our pastor, and he over 3 Springs. So we went up there and got married, and we went on to Bardstown and eat dinner at a restaurant, and went to the old Kentucky home. Went through the old Kentucky home. Buster had been there, but I never had, and Carl and Tracy never had. So we went to the old Kentucky home, went through that, and then come back home that night. We didn't have money still. We come back home. Mammy Slaughter fixed a wedding supper for us, and had Ma'am and Easton, Buster's sister that was married, and Mom and Papa, and fixed us a nice supper. And the next morning, we got up and had breakfast, and went from the breakfast table to see the oil well come in. That was during the oil boom. And Pa Slaughter's first oil well was drilled in. We just got up from the table, left the table, just like we got up from it, and went to see the well come in. And so then they got oil. And so, well, at the time we married, Mammy was keeping 4 men, boarders. So the very next week she took on 8 more men. 4 men would use a bed. 2 would sleep in the daytime, and then the drillers would sleep in, and then there was a driller and a helper, you know, that worked, one worked days and the other worked night, and 4 men used 1 bed. So we had 2 beds in the back room upstairs, and there was 8 men that stayed up there. They'd get up, go out at midnight, and of course Buster just had 1 sister, and she was the oldest child, and of course she had married and gone, had great big children when we married. And that bunch of boys, what they didn't do was marked off. And Pa Slaughter was just as big in it as he was. Papa would have skinned us alive if we'd have done things that Pa Slaughter encouraged us to do. And all them men left to stay there with all them boys. The ones that go out at midnight and hoot and holler, and Pa Slaughter would, he just eat it up. He was like that too. They'd wake up everything on the place. Mammy Slaughter had a bell that sat on the post at the stairway, and when they'd go out, when she'd get a meal, we'd get a meal ready, she'd ring that bell and they'd come. And when they'd go out, the ones that go out and ring that bell and wake everybody up, and the ones that come in and ring it. Oh, we had a house full of, there was 12 men boarded there. And then Pa Slaughter and Paul and Perry and Buster. Now it was a madhouse for sure, but Mammy and me cooked for all that gang. But we lived in the house with them that year, and then the next year we moved to over on Spencer Place and lived over there for two years, I believe it was. And then we bought the farm that you know, and lived there till Buster died.
Well, when was Faye born?
Faye was born in 1931. We had Faye come just in 9 months after we got married, and you didn't know things then like you do now. So Faye was born in September we married in December and Faye was born in September. But I wasn't pregnant when we got married. That is for sure. Anyway, we, but everybody in the family, they always said Faye was the favorite grandchild of the whole family, and I guess she was, because everybody was crazy about Faye, and she was such a sweet girl, and she was 13 years old when Buster died, and Peggy was 13 months old. I thought that was a coincidence. Buster died the 6th of September, and Peggy was 13 months old the 7th of August, and Faye was 13 years old the 18th of September. So they all said, Papa said, oh, you got to sell the farm, you got to sell it, and I said, not going to sell it, not going to sell it. And that year, we had a field full of big cattle, but it didn't rain much, and and cattle wasn't worth nothing. That was just, they just wasn't worth nothing. Buster said, well, I've got feed enough to feed them, and I'm going to keep them, not going to sell them. We had and so after Buster died, they all, Papa said, oh, you got to sell everything, turn it all into. I said, no, Buster was going to keep them, and I'm going to keep them. So I wouldn't sell them. They wouldn't have brought nothing. And that the next year it rained, and we had plenty of pasture, and them cattle was big, and they really done good. And that fall, when I sold them cattle, they brought more than the whole farm would have brought the year before. And that's where it kind of got my start. We was out of debt. We had just got out of debt on the farm when Buster died. But I didn't have, and we had a little money in the bank, but I didn't have enough to pay his burial expenses. But we had a bunch of hogs that was just about ready for the market. We was fixing to sell, and Mr. Dixon was there, the undertaker that had buried Mammy, Pa Slaughter, but Mammy was still living at that time. But I told Mr. Dixon, I said, now I can't pay you all of it till we sell the hogs, but I'll pay you part of it, and I'll pay you the rest when we sell the hogs. And he said, that's fine. He was a good friend of the family, and he said, you don't have to pay any of it now. I said, yes, well, I'll pay what I've got. And then I finished paying him when I sold the hogs. And we stayed there till the first day of the year. And I rented the farm and moved to an apartment here in town. And I lived there 2 years and 8 months, and then bought this house. I moved here the first day of September in 1947. I've been here ever since. But I had the money to pay for it when I bought it. I didn't go in debt. I've always saved, and you know, the good Lord has blessed me. I made enough on the farm for us to live on. I didn't work until Peggy started school. I stayed at home and kept Peggy till when she started school. Then I started working. And Ms. Martin, that lived right across back here in this house right behind, kept Peggy after she'd get off from school. When Peggy, she went to school when I went to work, I carried her to school. And then she'd come back to Ms. Martin's, and Ms. Martin would keep her till I got off from work. She got out of school before I'd get off from work. And I worked at the warehouse. That's the first job I ever had, was at the warehouse. I worked in the office, and I worked there for 20-some years. And then I worked the next job I had. I worked at Mr. Green's hardware store here in Horsecade. But when I already had my job at the warehouse, and but we could do a sale. I just worked on sale days in the office, and we could do a sale in about 4 hours, and I'd work down there and then come back to my job. And of course, that didn't last long, and I had that job first, and it was when I got these other jobs, I was to have time to go back to that. I worked at Mr. Green's for I guess 2 years. He had a store here and one at Cave City and one at Munfordville. And he rented, he didn't own the building